everyone, welcome to the Writer's Realm podcast, and thanks for joining us on the epic adventure we call writing. We're your hosts,
Austin Matthews,
Austin and Bob Adado, and today we're going to be talking about balancing tropes with our special guest, TD Orel. How are you, TD?
I'm doing great. I'm honored to be here chatting with you guys. I write young adult, high fantasy, epic fantasy, and I'm also an animator. So I do like some stop motion animation, and actually these last 2 years, I've been working on a stop motion project with a buddy that hopefully the trailer is going to be dropping this month. But yeah, we build all of our sets by hand, and we make all the characters. And like I said, it's been over 2 years that we've been working on this, and it's the prologue for my series Titan's Nest.
No way!
That's cool.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible! Well, tell us about Titan's Nest.
Yeah, so Titan's Nest, like I said, it's a fantasy series. Book 1 is out right now. Book 2 is coming out also this year. Predominantly, it's about these dragon eggs fall from the heavens above, and when they hatch, they will bite a young person and give them an elemental power, depending on what kind of dragon it is. And if you're bitten, you're chosen to train as a bitten knight, and you'll go to the capital of the world, Dazarath, which is the capital is called Titan's Nest, hence the name Titan's Nest. And so Titan's Nest follows a unlikely character who his older brother is bitten, and no one is surprised. His older brother Maximus is physically gifted. He's really intelligent. He's unyielding, and he just has unlimited potential. And so everyone's like, yeah, absolutely, Maximus should be a bitten knight. He'll be an excellent bitten knight. And the bitten knights kind of serve as like almost like a UN to Dazarath. So they kind of protect all 6 different regions and are like kind of Dazarath's greatest warriors. So Maximus, on his way to the capital of Titan's Nest to train as a bitten knight, there's a twist of fate, and our unlikely main character, Darren, is actually going to have to secretly inherit his brother's dragon and his destiny. And he may not have the physical giftings to do it, but he may just have the wit and the will.
Wow.
All right.
I mean, that's
sold
amazing.
me.
Yeah, we're gonna have to catch up on this series. Well, how can we find you? How can listeners find you?
On Instagram and TikTok, and actually just set up a new YouTube page today. It's all at TD Orel _author.
Okay, and you also have a website.
And I also have a website, TitansNestSeries.com.
Okay, and I'm on the website right now, and it is absolutely beautiful. He's got a beautiful custom-made map of his world with Titan's Nest in the middle. He's got everything in there. I see rivers and roads, and but you have how many books out right now?
So just the first book is out currently. Book 2 is coming out this year.
Okay. And perfect. I mean, I'm in awe of. I just can't stop talking. He's got all these graphics, these incredible graphics that are just like. Are you going to make this into like a board game or something? This totally looks like it's going to be a board game soon.
Do you know what? Actually, a college student who is in an engineering/business program that read the book this year, he actually for his like capstone end project, they had to design and actually like make a prototype for a board game. And so I got a random message from this kid, and he was like, hey, I read Titan's Nest. I loved it. Could I have your permission to use like all your graphics images to make a board game about Titan's Nest?
I told you, see?
Yeah.
I'm a college student too.
So yeah, it's really cool. All the images like look really great on like in that medium.
Yeah.
And I was very honored that he has to do that. So came out great. I don't currently have plans for a board game. Like I said, with there's going to be 3 books. So I'm in the middle of writing book 3. Like I said, book 2 is coming out. We have the stop motion film that's dropping this year as well. So currently no board game at the moment.
At the moment.
But that would be great down the line,
I could totally see that. I mean, it's got everything. So in your book, I am just so this is so many. I have so many questions in your book. So the kids want to get bitten.
Yes. So,
okay.
Yeah, as unpleasant as it sounds to be bitten by a dragon hatchling, your greatest goal in life is to be bitten, and every 100 years, only 6 kids are bitten. Yeah. And so when the dragon eggs hatch, there's a big announcement that goes out to the 6 kingdoms. All the young adults get to come and get presented to the hatchling, And yeah, kids are greasing up their hands with bacon grease and keeping Jimmy Deans in their pocket, hoping to seduce the dragon for sure. Because yeah, like I said, you immediately, no matter like what your race or your social standing is, if you are bitten, you are above all the kings and highborns of the world. You are on a tier of your own.
Right.
Yeah, you're definitely fingers crossed that you are the one that gets bitten.
Okay, and I can see this as being very political too. Like, you know what I mean? Like the elite, the kings are the ones in power. They want their kids bitten, so they're going to do whatever they can, right?
Yeah, totally. And there's a line called the Thunderforge line, that you can imagine what element they wield. And they intentionally have intercourse with as many people as possible in hopes of presenting their line to the dragon that comes from their land of Voltar, which has the Surge Fury, which is lightning and thunder. So they intentionally are trying to have as many kids as possible to ensure that they keep the Thunderforge line being bitten throughout their lineage.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. All right. So that's Titans, and this is self-published, or are you going through a publisher?
Self-published currently.
Self-published. Yeah. Isn't that the best? I love it. You get to do whatever you want. I love being self-published.
But then you also have to do everything you want.
Yes, that's right.
That's very true too.
Right.
Yeah, we still need to do a podcast on self-publishing because control is something people love, but then the
doing.
Yes, then the doing, the paying. The whipping out the card for everything.
That's fair. The doing or the paying or the both.
Yeah. But it's fun. All right, so good. And your books are on Amazon, or where are they at?
Yes, sir. Available on Amazon.
Okay, good. Available on Amazon. Dragons are hot. You're just right in the thick of it. I think we were talking to somebody. Wasn't it Holly Austin mentioning about her agent mentioned that dragons are really hot right now? So you are
also,
in.
Dragons are just really cool.
Yeah. When are they not hot? Honestly,
dragons are always hot, right?
You're right. Yeah.
Unless they're ice dragons, and then
Sure.
Yeah.
Which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, so you said there were 6, so it's 6 different elements. I'm just curious, what are the 6, if you don't mind?
Thank you for asking. So I never in Titan's Nest, I never say the word magic. The magic system is called Fury. So there's 6 different kinds of Fury. There's Frost Fury, Flame Fury, Aqua Fury, which is controlling, manipulating water. Flora Fury, which is plant life, anything green essentially. Surge Fury, which is lightning, thunder, and then Shade Fury, which is the manipulation of shadow and dark energy, and there's some psychic abilities.
Oh wow,
love that,
dude. I mean, that's and on your website, there's all these little, they look like tiles, gaming tiles, and you click on an icon to learn more. So those are all the Furies that you're talking about.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I love breaking out from the traditional 4 or 5 elements too. That's really nice actually speaking to our topic, now that we're into it, is breaking free from that, because you have avatars, you get the 4 elements, and so getting a little bit, it's similar, but then you get the nice twists of originality in there too.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, and that's of course the challenge is how to. I had a professor that would always say, "There's nothing new under the sun." No matter how hard you try, there's really nothing new under the sun. And so it is, how do we put that twist on it that makes it feel original and compelling, to keep turning the page when, because at surface level, you could say, okay, it's about an unlikely kid trying to become a dragon rider.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty traditional trope. And so how do we, shift and twist those tropes? And of course, there's the difference of a trope and a cliche, and unfortunately I think trope nowadays is becoming almost a negative term. And trope by no means is a negative term, but obviously cliche is, I think, the dark side of tropes. And so we want to avoid cliches, but we also want to utilize those beloved tropes that everybody already knows and recognizes, and that feels at home. It's the kind of thing you love to read, like a Dragon Rider story, which, in my opinion, are some of the best stories.
Right. So Dragons of Pern, you've read?
I actually haven't.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Question a lot.
Yeah, Dragon Riders of Pern by, I can't remember her name, but excellent writer. Yeah, great stories. So, I mean, we got dragons. So, what can we just ask? What kind of tropes that you added into your book so far?
There's the reluctant hero,
Okay.
Dragon Rider, the like distinct factions of the kingdoms. I tried really hard to like when it, by the end of the book when you hear Voltar or Volcaro or Eclipto, Rhymer, like when you hear the names of the kingdoms, I love that trope of the different factions, and like when you hear their names, I hope that the reader like immediately can picture those cultures and can picture the element that is connected to that word, or so the trope of having the different factions, and also I don't know how to define this trope, but there are two conflicting narratives. So we have our main character Darren, who is training to become a Bit Knight, and we have another character who is the book also follows, that's become entwined with this cult that is convinced that the Bit Knights are actually this really corrupt and evil form that have almost like enslaved the dragons, and so their objective is actually to butcher the Bit Knights. And so we have
the
these
dragons. Let's go.
Yeah, so we have these conflicting views of like, are the Bit Knights everything that they say to be, or are they actually, this kind of like wicked and corrupt tyrants, essentially?
Right.
So I don't know what that trope would be called, but two conflicting point of views.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's called either, but I love it, and it's one of my favorite things to do in books. Is just be like, hey, here's who you think is the hero, and then I'm going to present something else to be like, hey, maybe they're villains, and they don't know it. I don't know. Yeah. So. Yeah.
No, we need that. We were just talking about that. How Austin is our contrarian.
I'm not for this podcast.
Yeah, but we need that. We need that other point of view. Because it can't all be like, oh, we're all on a righteous cause, because guess what? I mean, there it is right there. I mean, I just talking about the Templars, who the church is like, yeah, we're going to go, but they're a bunch of thugs, going in there.
So Assassin's Creed has taught me anything.
Well, yeah. I mean, Assassin's Creed has taught me everything. So,
yeah. Will I die if I leap from here onto the next building?
Yes, you actually will.
Yes, you will.
Not if there's a bale of hay, though.
Yeah, there's a bale of hay. You're good to go.
You can jump from a skyscraper if there's anything. So, that's right.
Yeah. So we're talking about the balancing tropes, and you just mentioned we do need them. So I remember talking to a younger writer, and she was kind of saying what you just said, like, oh, this is a trope, oh, forget it, I can't do that. And I, whoa, wait a second. No, we do need tropes, right? So can we just talk about that for a little bit, how tropes are absolutely necessary for our stories? Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, so like you can think of it too, like, because to TD's point is that like it does have kind of a negative connotation as we've like come into, the modern time. And so it does kind of lean into that cliche kind of a thing. But if you think about it as an archetype, like archetype is just this shortcut of like, hey, it's, the chosen hero, those kind of things. And the, realistically, it's the same thing as a trope, but it just doesn't have that negative connotation to it. And so if you think about it as, here's an archetypal story that I'm telling, enemies to lovers, like that's going to be the archetypal story that I'm telling. If that helps you get through in your brain that tropes are okay and necessary, it's a shortcut in your reader's mind to go, hey, will I like this story? Yep. What kind of things are going to happen in this story? Is it actually what I'm interested in? Because at the end of the day, we want to connect with the readers that want to read our stories,
right?
Because that makes them happy, that makes us happy, and
Yep. No, that's true. Yeah. So I don't know how about let's boil it down to basics. Like when we're writing out our stories, TD, like did you wanted to write about dragons? So did you? I'm just asking because some of us are going to do that. Like, are we going to go look for the tropes that belong in a dragon book, or did you just write out the whole story and kind of develop the tropes from there?
I definitely just as I went. You pull tropes from any narrative, and I think why like. When we say that they're essential, a lot of times when we tell someone to go pick up a book or go see a movie, the first thing we do is we often compare it to, another franchise or film or book that we love.
Right.
And it's actually like a really useful tool. And like, it's by no means bad to say, blanking on an example. So just saw Alien Romulus.
Oh, nice. I heard it was good.
Which is fantastic. And I
Nice.
was really pleasantly surprised. And now I'm trying to think of an example of things to compare that to, and I can't. But the tropes.
well, I mean, almost all the other Alien movies. I mean, that's what everyone does. I mean, this is like number 6 or 7 or something. So
right, and so the trope would be like, okay, it's a bunch of ill-equipped young adults, almost essentially doing a heist. Immediately, that's a trope that you're like, oh, I love unequipped people in scary situations.
Yeah.
So of course, it's not a bad thing by any means, and of course, as we work, like, unfortunately, it can feel really frustrating too as a writer when people are like, because actually when I first pitched Titan's Nest to a colleague at the time, the first thing they were like, oh, it's just like Avatar, and not Last Airbender as in Avatar blue people. And I was like,
it's like
what?
Avatar meets Avatar.
Wow.
I was like, I don't see the comparison. And then he like went on to say like, oh, because like Jake Sully was never meant to be the Na'vi. He, and his brother was supposed to. And I was like, oh, I hate that connection, but it's true, I guess. Yeah, so obviously, like, people will always see tropes in our work, and we'll always pull from other tropes subconsciously, whether we intend to or not. And like I said, people always see them, and sometimes it's a huge compliment when people see them, and other times it can feel frustrating as well. I don't know where I'm going with this bit, but that's what I have to say.
And to that point too, I think as authors, it's like you said, we're trying to avoid them, but part of that too is like, if somebody describes our work using tropes, it can feel a little reductionist, where it's like, it's more complicated than that. But it's like, we have to understand, like, they're just communicating, and it's the shorthand that we're using, like, and talking about pitching it to somebody.
Right.
Like, the easiest way to pitch to somebody is to go, hey, it's like this meets this. So like my favorite one is like, oh, it's Grimdark Pokemon. Like, you don't know what you know what Grimdark is, and you know what Pokemon is, and you can kind of get an idea of what the two look like together. And it sounds weird, but it's like just taking those two things and smashing them together. It's like, okay, here's 2 tropes, put them together. That's what this kind of is, the closest amalgamation I can make of this story.
Yeah, that's great. And that's like what we're talking about. We're looking for readers, and I'm not gonna say, well, it depends on where you're at. I mean, some people will go look and see, well, what's selling, what's hot right now. We just kind of mentioned dragons are really hot. And so you're going to go, let me go look at all the dragons and what do they have in them? What are the tropes that they have? And then you go from there. But some of us, like me, will I just wrote whatever. And it just happened to be steampunk, because it was like, well, should this be historical fantasy or steampunk? And I'm like, no, I do like steampunk. I love the aesthetic. So I'm going to go with steampunk. But then after that, there's no, I don't know. It would be hard. But like you said, Austin, it is like comparing other movies, or what we're talking about. It is Sherlock Holmes meets Mission Impossible. So most people will get that connection right away. But I mean, tropes they're there to help. I mean, we use them liberally. But how do we balance the tropes with, like, what Austin was talking about earlier with the originality? Because that's what you want to do. I feel like you want to. Again, the caveat being, if you're writing to market. If you're writing to market, then you're going to write out, shifter romance, let's just say. You're going to write out all those specific tropes that are in all the other books, because that's what you're going to do, because you're writing to market. So it is different.
Oh man, you just reminded me. So speaking of shifter romances, I was like, hey, it's kind of interesting to like have shifters shift at different times, like, because it's like full moon is like the cliche thing. Right. It's like, well, what if it's at a new moon? Well, new moons are during the broad daylight, and I'm like, well, that's very unfortunate. And I feel like it would be so much more amusing to have shifters like midday. That's when you transform. I'm sorry, at noon you're stuck as like whatever, and like
On the
okay, let's
bus.
get really weird with it. Suddenly, Manticore right on the bus. Yeah, it's just like.
That's
But yeah,
funny.
and it's like that's a little maybe too far off in left field. But like, okay, we'll take it to a place where you haven't seen it. Like, and what
Yeah.
are the inconveniences of it? Is like,
Right.
is there a reason that the trope is the way that it is because it just makes sense that way, or is like, you know, are there things that you can play with? Like I think it's super interesting that you've taken these two kind of like ideas of the like dragons and then combined it like as the source essentially of this magic of the Furies. And so like taking those two things and finding like, okay, what happens if these are combined is a really great place to get your creative juices flowing, as well as just, you know, evolve a trope of your own essentially.
Yeah, that's. I assume what you said was just great, but all I was thinking about was like, hey, why were you late for work? And they're like, there's a Manticore on the bus.
Hey, it happens, you know.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think we do when as writers, we will pick out stuff that we like and put it together with other stuff that we like too, right? TD, like what would be a couple of examples that you have in your books?
Like a lot of young adults my age, their gateway drug into fantasy was Aragon. And so there's for sure some like it's like something I absolutely have used from Aragon is the dragon can communicate to the writer telepathically. So that's I don't know if that's considered trope, but it's an archetype that I stole for sure.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm a huge anime fan. I really love anime. And so I think some of the like found family villain becoming a hero like tropes and like narrative themes I think I stole from animes that I love. And maybe not even stole, but just obviously like seep into your work subconsciously, just because you get obsessed with those things for 10 years and they're bound to wiggle their way in there, obviously.
Right. Yeah. Like and I love that you're doing epic fantasy. Why epic fantasy, right? And I when I'm planning, I'm still planning out my epic fantasy, but I don't know. I keep going back and forth on that particular trope of YA or not, but or that genre, I should say. It's not a trope. But wow, I have no idea what I was going to say. There, it's catching TV. I'm so embarrassed. I had a great point and like it just disappeared. It'll come back. It'll come back late tonight in the shower. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things. Like I've always really enjoyed just the enemies to lovers, but I was like, okay, well, like in the book I'm working on right now, I'm like, let me flip it. So it's like it's got the love interest suddenly becomes the enemy, but the lover of the enemy as well. And so it's like there's the betrayal, but then there's also, well, hey, now you're the significant other of my enemy, and I don't know how to react to this. And like usually calm, collected person is like, well, I'm gonna be totally mental in this battle because I'm fighting against this person. And it's like there's so many even just doing a little thing like that where it's like you just flip it. It's just nice. So
okay, now I remember. Thank you, Justin.
You're welcome.
What I was getting to, where like I want to take things that I do like, and then it's almost like you're cooking. Like you add some stuff to the pot, some meat, and then some potatoes, but then like something original is going to come out of that. I feel while we're writing, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's I feel like TD. Like I looked at all again. Your website's amazing, but like all that stuff is incredible. Like just what you're coming up with, all the kingdoms and all the different elements, including the dark element, the Eclipto. That was amazing. So like that's the fun, right, of writing. Like we can take this the boy and his dragon kind of trope that you picked out from Aragon, but you make it yours while coming up with your own story.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like you could assign us, the same 6 tropes that we had to use in our books, and we would all come up with a completely different story.
Yeah.
And so like I think that us factor of how it gets filtered through makes a big difference. Or like even you choosing the specific elements that you chose. Like my first book has element manipulation as well, and like I was like, okay, I've got some of the traditional ones, but I'm like, okay, well, cool. We're going to do light in here, and there's disease over there, and like just going like, hey, how weird can we get? So there's friction, like poor unfortunate soul that gets friction versus, oh, I can bend fire, like.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's great. And then two, I felt that even just like those 6 original elements, I feel like I've seen that in other mediums and other stories, and so even there, I was like, okay, and this is a light spoiler, so if you don't want spoilers, turn your headphones off. But so then I took it even a step further. I said, okay, like what if a child from Voltar is bitten by, which is the Lightning Kingdom, is bitten by a dragon from a different region, and so there may or may not be some hybrid fury manipulation in there. So we see there's more elements outside of just the 6 elements.
Ooh.
Nice, I like that.
And is there going to be somebody with like all the elements or something like that? Maybe that's a huge spoiler alert, but
no, I don't currently have plans for that.
All right, there you go. That's book 4 then. Good for you.
Yeah.
I'll take royalties later.
Yes, I'll give you credit for that for sure.
Thanks. I'm sorry, Austin, what were you gonna say?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, so I don't actually remember what my transition was, but I was going to talk about how I was drawing on, it was the, mixing the stuff. And so like mine is kind of like mashing up, like if you had the Avatar magic, but then you also like the source is like the Philosopher's Stone from Full Metal Alchemist. And so it's like, there's this whole dark thing and each one of them has to wrestle with. It's like, okay, this makes me powerful. It gives me that status, but like the souls of all the dead people are talking to me and screaming at me all day, every single day. And like, how do you balance? Like, okay, it's giving me a better life, but it's also torturing me constantly.
Yeah.
So,
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's from your book?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me the title immediately.
Yeah. So that's Deviant Reign. And so that one has 8 different magics. So the 8 different elements. And then there's a prequel that I'm working on that has 12. And some of them overlap. Some of them are different. Because I was like, I'm going to go bonkers with some of these different elements. So
yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah. And is that the same as the Grimdark Pokemon situation?
No, that's in a different world. Well, a different connected world. So
okay, cool.
Austin usually has $7 going at the same time. That's just
I think I have 12 finished rough drafts that I'm like
all
theoretically
right?
editing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean some of them are connected, but you know how it goes.
And then Austin, I don't know how it goes.
And then today I just knocked out a 3,000 word outline for a cozy fantasy about a mail carrier in a fantasy world, and I'm loving it so much. We were joking about it in our writing group, and it's like that sounds really funny, and I'm just gonna. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Is the mail carrier? Is he riding some sort of fun animal, or is he just on foot?
He is riding a horse for the first couple of chapters, then he gets robbed by bandits, and he's like, well, this is life. And so, yeah. And the whole thing is that he has to, over the course of it, figure out whether he's delivering good news or bad news to this evil warlock, essentially, so that he knows whether he should hang out and get rewarded or get out of town as fast as possible. So he has to, like, break the seal and read the message and then reseal it without getting caught and killed.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just nice little cozy.
Yeah, nice little cozy with its own tropes. So is there a time when we're writing and then... I mean, I really don't even think... I feel like I'm disqualified from this because I don't pay attention to this tropes business. I
think about it afterwards. So after I finish a rough draft, then I go through and I'm like, oh, hey, or even as I'm writing it, I'll be like, oh, hey, this is kind of a, an enemy's lover situation. Okay. Is it too tired, too played out, like the way that I have done it? Does it bore me now that I've realized how I'm using it? And then I'm like, okay, well, how can I twist this? How can I make it more, more mine?
Yeah. Or even like, are we going to remove something? Like, I like get lost in, if you're just talking about that enemies of lovers, like, man, this doesn't even make sense. I'm pulling it completely out.
Well, I do think there are some tropes that are just like no-goes. Like if you're fridging somebody, which is like using, like for people that don't know, it's like killing off the girlfriend in the very beginning just as a justification for everything else that happens. And like, that's the only thing that they do in the entire story. Then either I mean, solve that in one way or the other, whether it's actually giving them more of a role, like actually having them have a name and a position to play other than just dying to motivate your male protagonist. So like there are some tropes that are
okay.
maybe
I mean,
not.
that's the boys though. That's what happens in the first like 2 minutes, I think.
Yeah, but that might also be purposely done because of what the boys is.
I don't know. Yeah, we gotta look for reasons. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of content now that does a really great job of intentionally hitting those cliches, you know, as sarcasm.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, the boys is the master of that.
Right.
Well, so when does a trope become a cliche? When is it just?
When I roll my eyes.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. When you just see it, like you just kind of mentioned that. Okay.
Yeah, it's the whole I'll know it when I see it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like if you are intentionally picking something out of another story because you've seen it done well, and maybe it really doesn't connect with like the true narrative of your project, whatever it is, and you're just thrown in there because it's popular. You're just thrown in there because you think like, oh, when I post on Instagram, I can say, oh, this has enemies to lovers, and maybe you threw it in at the end just to hopefully get a couple of those readers who are looking for that trope. So I think that's when like it's not intentional. It's maybe not moving your story in the direction you originally set out. I don't know if that makes sense, but when it's not intentional, when it's not even something you're not even passionate about, you're just like, hey, this is gonna get people to pick it up. This is gonna get clicks on Book Talk, and then that's when I think it starts to slide into a cliche. And I feel like it's kind of obvious when you find one of those things. Like you said, it's hard to describe, but you know it when you come across it, and it inherently makes you roll your eyes for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, even things that are cliches can just be knocked out of the park if done really well. But like, you know what? You have to look at yourself and ask, am I gonna not nail this one? And then two, it's like you can even try and then kind of get some beta reads on it and be like, okay, well maybe this section needs to be removed because it's not serving the greater plot. It's not serving the book as a whole.
Right. And we don't want to treat our readers like they're dumb and like kind of like what your point was, like you're just looking to make a cash grab on purpose, but we can't fool our readers. Our readers are highly intelligent and they've read a crap ton. I mean, going back to Shifter's Romance, they've read tons of them. Or you may have a new reader, I don't know. But they'll be able to see that this story is not authentic and that it's an obvious like, well, geez, they just threw this thing in there, and then they'll never pick up your book again. So like so that's why we want to stay away from inauthentic writing and cliches when it gets to be too much. Yeah, so what's
that's a good point.
Good point. All right, guys, have a good night. No. But yeah, I mean, again, tropes are absolutely necessary. We do want them, but we don't want, I guess, too much of it, right? We want more of a story. I mean, story is definitely going to trump the trope, of course. But
well, like thinking about, so like TD, you doing like dragon stuff, like how far do you feel like you can play with that before people get upset with you and be like, hey, these aren't dragons anymore. Like, hey, dragons don't bite people and give them magical power. Like, where's that line? Do you feel like you try to stay within that, or do you worry about it? Like, do you worry about what people think of, like, or have these preconceived notions?
I don't have a lot of gifts, but one of them is genuinely not caring too much what people think.
I love that.
Yeah, and so my dragons for sure. Although again, the trope of the Dragon Rider series, one of the tropes that I've kind of twisted again is, yes, it's a kind of unique magic system of how the Furies pass back and forth, and so like the dragon gives the rider elemental power. Also, the rider, so the dragon essentially stays cat-sized at basically all times, but the rider can pass their own fury to the dragon, and that can help the dragon transform in an instant and like a big burst of whatever their element is into like a rideable form. And then there's like different classes. So there's like a chariot class, which is the smallest, Ravager class, which is middle, and then Titan class, which is the largest. And so there was never a part of me that was like, ooh, like true classic Dragon Rider fans might get pissed that like the dragon is little and then it can transform on a whim. Just because I was like, I think it's really freaking cool. And if I had a pet dragon, I'd want it to be on my shoulder most of the time.
Yeah.
But then, turn into an absolute monster when I need it. Which too like lends to some like I think really creative scenes, action scene of flying in on your dragon.
Yeah.
The dragon shrinks down, you fly through the window, you blast a bunch of people with fireballs, your dragon's on your shoulder again, then you jump out the window, your dragon transforms and you fly away. I think that's really cool.
Yes.
Again, that's kind of like maybe some anime influence, but for sure taking the liberty of twisting like the beloved Dragon Rider trope and saying like, how can we do dragons differently without being cliche, and doing something hopefully fun and exciting people haven't seen before. And I certainly haven't seen that, and it's one of the things that I think makes the story pretty unique. And like I said, like I have the gift to like. I've always just written what I think is really cool. And I've tried to never look at like, well, I'm going to write this because it's popular. I'm going to write this because it's selling well. And maybe that's why I'm really poor, but
you're a writer. All writers are
that's
poor,
right.
friend. There's no rich people sitting around here.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll just ignore Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, he's a god. He's not a writer anymore. So.
That's fair.
True. And I've always been something of a mentor to Brandon, so I'm glad you brought him up. Everything he knows about writing and marketing, and that's really cool to see him blossom as he has.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and I'm wondering too, I mean, we're talking about balancing tropes and that's our topic, but I'm wondering do you think we rely on tropes too much instead of just writing a story? You know what I mean? Just sitting down. I mean, like it sounds like TD, like when you didn't, I mean, you loved Aragon, so you're like, I want to write this, but in the background, the trope would be a boy and his dragon. But like, I'm sure you didn't sit down with that and write that on a piece of paper, the boy and his dragon. All right, let me write a story based on that. No, you just like started writing a story, right?
Right. Yeah. So the first scene that I actually wrote for like the Titans Nest series is actually the like concluding battle of book 2. And of course it's just a couple unique dragons going head to head, and my humble opinion, a pretty sweet battle scene. And so that was the first thing I ever wrote. And then I said, okay, like, and I've kind of had the idea of, the dragon companion giving them elemental abilities since I was a kid. And so, that obviously came into that. And then I just said, okay, I really love this magic system and like the abilities between the dragon and the rider. Like I wrote this big battle scene and then I was like, okay, how do we get here? And then that's when we started with the first parts of book 1. And so, yeah, I mean, I think one of you guys touched on it earlier. I really don't know if I considered the tropes until after pretty much the book was done. And then I started to have to tell people what it was about. And then again, back to the comparison thing. And I was like, well, it's kind of like this and it has these elements. And then I was like, oh, okay, these are the tropes that are in there. I certainly didn't like sit down and like, okay, what tropes do I need to check off as I go through here? And I doubt too many people work like that. I think the tropes kind of form themselves and kind of are just discovered along the way. And again, there's nothing new under the sun, and so we can always compare parts of each of our stories back to something we've read before, even if it is really unique and new.
No, one of my favorite books of all time is The Great Train Robbery by Michael Crichton, and there's nothing fantasy about it, nothing magical. It's a heist, but it was written so well. Obviously, that was his first book, so that kind of put him in the spotlight. But I just loved everything about that, and so all of my books are basically a heist. It's a heist trope, if that's what we're going to call it. It's I have the MacGuffin, and like, all right, let's go. Everyone is after that. The bad guys are after that. The good guys are after that. Let's hurry up and get this thing before it falls into the bad guys' hands. That's just kind of something. I just love it too much, so I feel like I want to stray away from it, but like I can't help it. It's fun, so that's what I'm writing.
One of my
That's a good
favorite
sign.
animes is Train Heisty, Bakano. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
Okay.
It's so good. I mean, it might be a little bit gory for some people, but man, so good. But yeah, jumping over to something that TD you said, the whole how did it get here is one of my favorite things to ask myself because, like, I mean, for me, that's all my world building is. It's like I take an event and I'm like, okay, well, how did it get here? And then like go to that and it's like, well, how did it get here? And so it's like whether it's like, okay, well, where did dragons come from? Like, okay, cool, they came from eggs falling from the sky, but like, where did those come from? And like really getting into that, like, there's so many interesting stories.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so like for me, like the first story I ever wrote with a dragon in it was actually like the very beginning of dragons, and I was like, oh, they break into a laboratory because they're doing a heist, and everybody is dead, and like it's just all they see is a looming figure covered in blood, and they're like, well, this isn't great, and so like that's the origin of dragons. It was a scientific experiment gone wrong in a fantasy world using fantasy science, so, and it's just like, hey, you know.
Yeah.
It's those are the interesting things though. It's like how did we get here and going into all of that. Love that question.
Yeah.
That's how I operate mainly writing. I found that I never start chronologically. I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but yeah, usually, like you said, a big event, and then how do we work our way there? I usually write the ending first.
Yep. Okay. Wow. See, I've done that my past 2 books. Who were we talking? We were talking to somebody, and they're like, "That's so bizarre." I'm like, "Hey, calm down." But like, I'm sorry, but like, I know what the ending is because that's exciting, and I want to flesh that out. So I actually did write that out, and then that was like my anchor. Like, okay, well, how do we get here? You know, just like exactly what we're talking about.
That's what I tell people. I'm like, I write the ending. That's my North Star. I know exactly where I'm going.
Yes.
And just follow my heading.
And it's fun. It's fun.
See, I'm always at like that 70% mark. I hit the climax. Like that's what I know, and I'm gonna hit that. So it's like I get my beginning, I get all the way there, and then like the end is a surprise to me. Like I never know how it's gonna turn out. Because it's like that whole beginning part informs like, okay, who survives, who gets through, who wins in the climax and gets what they want. Yeah. And so it's usually not who I was rooting for beginning.
Yeah, you gotta throw a twist or 2 in there, huh?
Yeah, well, they just never agree with me. So the characters have their minds made up.
Yeah. Well, how about it's time for our don'ts. Don't do this with balancing tropes. And TD, we definitely have guests that offer 2 or more of these, if you can think of them. So that's totally completely fine. You can do 10 if you want.
But I will be doing 1.
Yeah. Dawson can only do 1. He's not allowed. So
yeah, I usually chime in on everybody else's stuff.
Yeah, that's why he does 1, and then he does
and then I argue.
You add like your own sugar to everyone else's. Let's see. So don't. I had 2 of them, and I have no idea where they went. Let's see.
I can take a stab at it.
Okay,
if you want.
Please do.
Yeah, go for it.
Do.
I'm just gonna basically reiterate what I already said, where it all comes down to my favorite writing advice, which is like just simply write what you're passionate about.
Yes.
If you start to again just look at what's popular and what's doing really well, and that starts to control what you're working on. I truly think like if you're not having fun and you're not writing like solely what your heart just wants to pour out and what you're not passionate about, it's genuinely not going to be good.
Yep.
And so I would honestly encourage people to turn their mind off to the idea of like, is this too much of a cliche? If you think it's too much of a cliche, but you're in love with the idea and you can't get out of your head, that's okay. Yep. And you can still pursue that idea and you can still work on that. And if you're genuinely crazy about it, I'm sure you'll twist it and maneuver it into a way that people haven't seen before. So I would argue, don't worry about the cliches of the tropes, right? Exactly what you're excited about in the moment, and get that down.
Nice. That was a big amen for me. Thank you. That was good.
I actually won't argue with that one.
No, it's not that. How can you? It's the gospel according to Orel, so we're good to go.
Okay. I guess for you go.
No.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say, so like what we've been talking about mostly is like, you know, tropes as a whole in the world, but like something I think is fascinating is our own personal tropes in our writing. And so like that might be super nitty gritty and very fine detail. So like for me, if somebody changes their name, like if a character chooses to change their name, something bad is probably going to happen to them. I don't know why. It's just something that has come up. And so like for me, it's almost a fun foreshadowing at this point because I've noticed it. I'm like, oh, this has happened. If I have people that read several of my books to be like, oh no, he changed their name. Like this cannot end well. And so it's like looking at those things in your own writing and going, hey, what patterns do I have that like, you know, aren't problematic patterns, and go, well, how can I use this to like clue people into things and use them as whether foreshadowing or to like just be like, hey, this is something that I enjoy about my work, and lean into the tropes that are, you know, personal to yourself. So don't be afraid to do that.
Nice.
I have a question for you, Bob, before you go, actually.
Oh, yes. Okay.
About a really classic trope, and I'm wondering if you know how to get around this. Something I've struggled with. So you love writing heists.
Yes.
And there's the trope where if we get to hear every detail of the heist, essentially the whole plan,
right,
before the heist happens, that tells me the heist is going to go wrong. But if the writer and narrator doesn't tell us all the plans, they kind of like hint at, they're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then it cuts to the next scene. Then we know it's going to work because we didn't hear the details. So whenever I hear the full plan, I'm immediately like, well, I know this shit's going to hit the fan at some point, and none of this is going to work out.
So because you don't want to read the thing twice.
Yeah, totally right. In book 2, I have they're busting somebody out of prison, and I've caught myself doing this, and I'm like, I won't tell you which one I do, but I do one of those things, and I was like, like I feel like seasoned readers are going to be like, well, I know what's going to happen, and so I'm curious. Do you have writing a lot of heists? Do you have a way around this?
You know how I'm thinking how I write them. I usually don't have a plan. There's no big okay. It's more like this is what this device is. This is what it does. Yeah, we need to find it right away, kind of thing. But there's no big plan. I think I did that in my second book. I have 4 books out now. So second book, I think I did do something like a bigger plan. Again, TD, just like what you did with they had to break somebody out of jail, they had to get in there. So there was a plan, but it wasn't told. Like I didn't share that. They already knew it. Okay, you know what to do. You know what to do. Okay, let's go. And so they went. But I don't tell the plan, and I make everything go to crap. So it's kind of a double negative kind of thing. Yeah. Because I'd rather that. I want some fun. I don't want it to be like, yep, we got it. You know, I mean, just think of Indiana Jones. You know, the first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, he had to go in there, and everything went wrong. He lost a guy, and he almost died more than 5 times. You know, but that's the stuff I like. So that's how I write it. I don't know if that's the correct way or what, but
yeah, I don't specifically write heists, but there are heists in some of my books, and I don't think that I sit down and do like hey, here's what the plan is, because one, I think that's really boring on mine, and so then 2, that solves your problem. It's like if it works, it works. If it fails, it fails. But then it's like you had no idea coming into it, and you just got to see it unfold as it went. Right. Yeah, to your point, like I instantly knew where you were going when you started asking that question, because it is such a trope of like, oh well, you know what? They explained the whole plan. I don't have to pay attention to the next, 15 pages or something, because it's all going to fall apart.
But even and to the point of like not, tropes aren't a bad thing, because even when they have a round table and they sit down and they explain the plan, I almost still like it, even though I'm like, okay, I know everything is going to get blown up in their face. Because then I'm just sweating the whole time, and I'm like, okay, what step is it going to go wrong? And so I'm still enjoying it.
Because that's the puzzle, is then what part of this gets screwed up?
Right.
Go wrong, right?
A great one for that. Quentin Tarantino's first movie, Reservoir Dogs, was like a heist that absolutely went to complete shit. So that was an amazing story. We always talk about movies here. We never talk about books, do we?
Well, and so like I think something that whenever I have heists, like my sequel to Deviant Reign has a heist as a major plot point, but because I have so many perspective characters, I just kind of skip by the planning section. So it's like, okay, you see the original person, then you get to see them like meet the team, but like they've already talked about their roles, and it's like, okay, and then they come back and it's like they've already talked about the plan. And so like you're meeting them in the in-between beats. So you're not getting all that stuff, but you know it's like, oh, the tension's building because we're getting closer and all these things. Like you get to see those like things to understand that, hey, we have development here, we're getting closer, but I'm in the dark because the protagonist is, the one getting robbed. So it's like, oh, I don't get to know how they're going to get past all their defenses and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, in TD, you've got a couple books. Austin probably has more than us. And then, I've got 4 books. So I'm still a beginner. This is why I get to talk to all you awesome writers through a podcast, because I have no clue what I'm doing.
Hey, it's okay. I've only published 1 though, so
okay.
I need to sit down and actually publish
okay.
at some point.
All right. Well, you're off the show then. Sorry.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm just kidding.
I've secretly published 2 other books that I don't talk about because they're terrible. I no longer have them up on the. Okay. I wrote them in college, and I just was like, you know what? The best way I decided in college, I'm like, I want to be an author, writer full time. I'm going to pursue this. I was like, what's the best way to pursue something? Just to do it.
That's right.
And so I just went for it, and truthfully, I learned a ton. But I would be devastated if any readers got their hands on those horrible books. But I'm glad I did it.
Hey, I mean, that's sometimes how I feel about the one I did publish. So, because it's like,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Austin.
I was just gonna say, I think that's something that we do a lot of times as authors is like look back at our old work, and I'm like, I don't care how good I ever get. 10 years past that, I'm going to look back at that work and go, oh man, I can't believe I wrote that. Sure. And so like, I mean, I think that's part of the thing of like, when you get better at something, you're going to see just how not good you were before.
Yeah. All right. So my don't. See. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. We're talking about something. No, that's what we do. I told TD before we started recording that we go off topic constantly. So we highly encourage it. That's fun.
Rabbit Holes, the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Let's change our name to Rabbit Holes Podcast. But the balancing tropes don't do this. I would say if you are going to go looking for tropes, there's nothing wrong with that. Please do. Please familiarize yourself with it. Okay. There's nothing wrong with it. If you pick let's just gonna pick the heist trope, I guess, for me. Don't rope yourself in to like, okay, it must look like this. It has to look like this. Okay. Let that just be like a very strong suggestion, like an example. Okay. Just like a statue. I mean, you type in Google statue, like, oh, but like all these statues are completely different from each other. Okay. So you need to add your own voice into whatever trope that you're going to put your stuff on. I mean, TD had a great question about me. What do I do with this situation? I'm like, well, I don't know. I write what's fun and exciting. And that's what he had said earlier. Like whatever you're passionate about, that's what you need to write. So don't rope yourself in. Don't block yourself in with like whatever trope you picked. Like, okay, I have to stick to these rules. Please do not do that, because then you're not authentic. You're unoriginal, and nobody wants that. We want your voice, your story out of that. Okay?
Yeah, and I think too, just to piggyback off that a little bit, not to argue, is to say like if you were Googling statues in order to kind of come up with your own statue, like the way that you look at this and the things that you enjoy about those statues are also your voice, and you're not copying by going, oh, I like this thing from the David, I like this thing from the Thinker, and putting those together to make your statue is not copying.
Yeah.
And it's learning what you enjoy about those tropes, or in this case, statues, and figuring out what your voice is.
Yeah. So, so that's it. Anything else do we want to add? Oh, Anne McCaffrey is the name of the author of The Dragon Riders of Perm.
There you go.
There's actually sci-fi books. I mean, sci-fi fantasy, I guess, but which surprised me. They are sci-fi books. Excellent. She's an excellent writer. Very flowery language. Please don't try to copy her. You'll lose. But like, I was just like, I don't even know what this means. What is this? But just beautiful, beautiful prose and fantastic stories. Okay, well, that's it for TD. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can we find you again?
At TD Orel underscore author, and then titansnestseries.com. And if you want to grab Titan's Nest, highly recommend the audiobook. My voice actor does an excellent job if you're into audiobooks. Totally recommend.
Okay. Titan's Nest. Yeah, please go to the website and buy his stuff. It looks fantastic. You have 2 books out?
One book currently, second book is coming out this year.
Okay.
Do you have a ish win?
That is such a good question. I for sure know that it's going to be before 2025.
Okay.
That's good.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Perfect.
And that stop motion film is also coming out this year, which, like I said, it's just me and one buddy. Over 2 years, we've built every set by hand, made every character by hand. I am really proud of it, so I'm excited to share it with
that is going to be so incredible.
Yeah, I'm so ready.
Yeah, so please follow TD Orel on his, and we'll provide the links for you in case you didn't jot them down. So we can go follow and wait for the second book in the series and this crazy sounding
Awesome stop motion
trailer, I guess, right? Is it a book trailer or what is it?
It's essentially, it highlights a prologue and some lore from Titan's Nest. So it's more than a trailer, you know. Okay. It's going to be like probably 7 minutes long, somewhere in there. So, or at least we're trying to keep it under like 8 minutes, but we'll see because it just continues to grow and expand. But
and suddenly feature length.
Yeah.
God,
and then a board game if you're down the road.
Down the corner.
All right, TD, you've been a blast. We'd love to have you on again if you'd accept our invitation. Please do.
I hope to never see either of you again.
Okay, perfect.
I promise we'll be on time next time.
Yeah.
No, this was awesome, you guys. Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun. I don't have a ton of writer buddies, so I'm going to be bugging you guys. I'd love to continue to chat about writing.
And I have to say real quick, TD, I did find you through Instagram, and you have a lot of very fun stuff on Instagram, your memes and what you're talking about. So it's very relatable for other writers. So please give them a follow.
Appreciate it. Yes. Unfortunately, I have posted a video every day for over 8 months. So
wow.
If you're just looking for bad content that's posted every day, Daddy's got you.
Daddy's got, and it's all writer related, or isn't it like any of it like personal? Like you're making a biscuit with butter or something, or what is this?
It's predominantly writing. There's a couple like Stormlight memes in there. There's some Red Rising memes in there. But yeah, it's mainly writing, encouraging other writers. A lot of it is like anti-marketing, where I'm like, hey, I don't want to be here. You don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Just buy my book. And then a ton of it is I post a bunch of all the like behind the scenes stuff of the stop motion film we're making.
Oh my gosh. How fun is that?
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to it, guys. All right. Well, thank you so much, TD. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels at the links below so you don't miss any of the Writers Room content. We always love to hear from our listeners. So if you have a question or topic you want us to dive into, please get in touch. Until then, have a great time writing, I guess. I don't know. Evening, day, I don't know.
Yeah, whenever you're listening.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Take care.